builders, breakers, and believers in AI. Welcome back to Dev in the Details. I'm Natasha Berman. I run demand gen and growth at Predibase, and today I get to play host. In this episode, and this is our second episode, we are going to talk about teams. And before you start rolling your eyes thinking that this is about HR, well, don't, because we will be talking about how the role of an AI engineer has changed, why security and engineering needs to stop being frenemies and actually start working together, and what the future of AI teams might look like. So with me today, of course, is Dev Rishi. He is someone who probably doesn't even need an introduction around here. Dev is our co-founder and CEO, and he has spent pretty much his whole career living and breathing AI, long before it became a buzzword. So Dev, thank you so much for taking the time out of your insane schedule. I know there's a hackathon going on.
Of course, no, I'm really happy to be back to talk about teams, roles, and personas and how that's changed with AI.
Awesome. So let's dive in. So Dev, traditionally AI engineering and security have been seen as sort of separate functions. If AI engineers and security teams can figure out how to collaborate, do you think enterprises will ever be able to adopt AI at scale? What's changing that, makes them need to become best friends now?
Yeah. I'll start off by saying that, if you scroll through Twitter, you probably see amazing revenue trajectories from a lot of AI startups. And the ones that are building, I think, are getting to be some of the fastest growing software companies in history. I think the really interesting thing about that is that's sort of happening while the large portion of the enterprise is actually still quite early in its AI adoption lifecycle. And I fundamentally believe that enterprises will be adopting AI at greater and greater rates, and that they're probably 1 to 5% of the way there right now. And so, what is really compelling, I think, about the market as it stands today is we've seen a lot of growth in consumption and a lot of disruption. And that's really happening from the extreme edge of the early adopters still. And the vast majority of the Global 2000 enterprise is like starting to come online now. One of the reasons I think that they're starting to come online now is because there's immense boardroom pressure for organizations to start to actually adopt AI and what they're doing inside their organization. Be more productive with code gen, start to embed AI into the actual products and services, be smarter on operational operations and logistics. There's a lot of different areas, and there's boardroom and exec level pressure to actually start to do that. One of the historical hindrances, I think, towards adopting AI in the enterprise has actually been trust, confidence, security, and governance. This is, I think, one of the biggest things that is going to start to take shape over the next 12 to 18 months, which is, I think, AI got thrown at a lot of these teams before there was really a framework for how to be able to operate it, responsibly and safely inside of an organization. And I think as the enterprises have started to experience this pressure, they're starting to figure out these frameworks now.
Got it. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Maybe you can share an example of where AI engineering and security came together successfully. And like if there is this example of what changed and what got unlocked with that collaboration.
Yeah. I mean, I think that some of the best examples here for today are actually maybe examples where people start to use AI to improve security itself. So AI obviously introduces a new set of threat vectors, but it also is a great tool in people's box of how to be able to solve these challenges. So even actually earlier today, the Predibase team released a webinar where we trained and fine-tuned small language models to be able to do sensitive data protection. So we can look at documents and identify whether there's PII or other types of sensitive data that is present in them, really with the goal of being able to prevent this type of data from making it its way into inadvertent sources. And so I think that's a great example of how security and AI teams actually partner together, because the security teams have the domain experience and the ability to source some of the really high quality data, and helped advise us on like how to actually develop some of the models in that direction. And the AI teams have the understanding of like how to be able to translate that domain experience into an LLM. And so with Predibase, we were able to build these models, evaluate them, get really great results right out of the box. And I'm starting to see this actually done increasingly, even inside of some of the leading edge code security companies like Endor Labs, which has used Predibase in the past also to train and fine tune models that exist for code security. And I think we're going to continue to see this evolve. Right now, some of the best examples, I think, of AI engineering and security coming together highly successfully are when security teams are starting to use AI for security. But I think over time, of course, that's going to evolve into a lot of different areas.
Got it. So what I actually also am hearing from you is that it sounds like the term AI engineer itself nowadays means something very different than it did even maybe 2 years ago. How would you define that now?
Yeah, I think to define AI engineering, I'd want to go back, even before AI engineering, a couple of phases. And I'd start off by talking about, the history of data science, then ML engineering, and AI engineering. So it really all started with data scientists. And if any of you have done linear regression in a high school stats class, as an example, a lot of the core thesis around data science and then ML and even Gen AI come from understanding some of the principles of knowing how to run regressions and kind of fit to historical data. Uh, Historically, I think that the people who practiced machine learning inside of organizations did look like these data scientists. Data scientists oftentimes had like advanced degrees in computer science and statistics. There's a lot of data science roles, Natasha, that I had friends that went to go that basically said a PhD was required in order to be able to do them. And I'd say until maybe 2016, it really felt like that was the entire world. It was like if you're doing ML, you had to hire data scientists who were PhDs. Starting 2016 and on, I think that people started to operationalize these data science models at a heavier rate. And that kind of gave birth to this new role that we call ML engineers. And ML engineers, the reason I say 2016 is like as the transformer architecture started to get developed and as deep learning started to become more of a thing inside of like at least larger tech companies, the actual engineering challenges of operationalizing ML became just as large as challenges of as some of the underlying data science work. So this new role emerged called ML engineering, where the thesis was the data scientist helps you build the model, and the ML engineer is the person who helps you wrap the model and do everything you need to do in order to get that into production, deployed, have pipelines, monitoring, deployment, and everything else along those lines. And I think for a while, these two personas started to actually exist in tandem. And what we saw in 2023 is I think the combination of these two personas really got subsumed via an API, via direct interface towards models, like through ChatGPT as an example, that AI engineers could start to use out of the box. And these AI engineers now have an incredible ability to start to build and prototype systems from day one, as well as productionize them a lot more easily. And it all came from like kind of lowering the barrier to entry of the technology that LLMs introduced.
Got it. Okay, then it feels like with evolution, like this rapid evolution of AI agents, like you don't really need a PhD now, right, to code and build things. It sounds like the prompt is enough at this point. So, what skills matter more right now? Like deep PhD style research, the ability to integrate, govern, operationalize models.
Yeah, totally. I think, look, I would probably say the two things I think about is number one, I think a skill that matters is like knowing how to evaluate models and evaluate the outcomes of AI. I know that there's a lot of different threads about this that exist online, but I'm definitely a believer that one of the hardest parts of like LLMs and Gen AI is just knowing what good looks like and if it's actually operating within those guardrails. And so I think evaluation is like one of those types of skills that becomes highly important. The second, I think, it's a little bit of a softer skill, but having a heavy iteration mindset is really important. So more of the scrappy developer rather than like the perfect architect oftentimes to be more successful when it comes to using LLMs in production. And then finally, I'll just say like software engineering principles like CI/CD, testing, monitoring, deployment. These have become really important as generative AI has actually taken rise, in particular as people are looking to integrate them more heavily into their workflows.
Interesting. Okay, so that makes sense. Um, if we look at engineering teams overall, how do AI models change the mix of roles? Like, for example, do you hire fewer front end and back end engineers because AI is, automating parts of their workflow?
It's a good question. The honest answer is I don't think we know all the different ways it'll impact the workforce just yet. But within product and engineering, I would say there's like two different changes that I see. The first is actually starting in 2018, 2019. we started to see this like shift left in ML and AI development, where engineers were the ones that were starting even before LLMs. We had this thesis that engineers were going to be the ones that do more ML workloads. And one of the reasons that we had this thesis is there was an open source project that one of my co-founders wrote called Ludwig. And it essentially allowed you to build deep learning model compositional pipelines through YAML configuration files. That's a mouthful, but it basically meant engineers could take infrastructure as code primitives and use them to develop ML models. And the amazing thing with Ludwig is we initially thought that what it would be great for is like data scientists to simplify their workflow. It was created by someone who's an ML researcher and a data scientist himself. But the people who gravitated the most towards it were engineers. There are people who were like, just give me the documentation and I'll figure it out. I don't want to be blocked on ML models anymore by needing to wait for data science time. And so I think that this trend has absolutely continued. And one of the types of things we see in terms of role changes are engineers are getting a lot more familiar with ML primitives, and it's accelerated the trend that we started to see in 2018, 2019. The second thing I'd say, like within product and engineering, is product management's also changing. Used to be the case where like you'd want to make sure you have a perfect scope, and it'd be a little bit of take aim, get ready, take aim, and then shoot. And now I feel like we're more in like the shoot, fire, aim like world where you basically are just starting to build a prototype as quickly as possible as a way to validate your idea. So I worked with one organization that said all their PMs are no longer required to write PRDs, but instead of PRDs, they're required to come up with like a vibe coded prototype. And obviously that's quite advanced in a lot of cases, but I think that's another direction that the product management role is really going to shift in.
Understood. Okay, well, thanks for that. Do you think we're seeing a democratization of ML engineering then, like where the most impactful work is like it's not happening in research labs anymore, but rather within product and AT teams? Is that what it is? Is that correct?
I think that we're definitely seeing democratization of ML engineering. I think that, highly, like now it's the type of impactful work is shifting. Used to be that like the research labs were doing highly impactful work that was very, very domain specific. So like, the AT&T Bell Labs was coming up with amazing things for AT&T as an example. I think a lot of the company specific stuff now is actually happening, as you said, within product and engineering and ML engineering, pushing the board boundaries, this new tool set that they have access to with LLMs. But I think that ML research is still highly relevant because they're the ones who are pushing the barriers and boundaries inside of some of these leading labs like OpenAI and Anthropic and Mistral and others. So we've kind of seen a bifurcation where like I think these like ML researchers are now coming up with like general purpose horizontal technologies, and then product engineering teams are like doing the vertical applications across them.
Okay, got it. Well, Dev, when we spoke before the interview, you mentioned that some of the most interesting ML work is being done by engineers who end up blocked by security and risk teams. Any chance you can just zoom in on this a little bit? Is that what is happening? And if yes, then why and how can organizations overcome that?
Yeah, I don't know if they're exactly being blocked, but somebody, we spoke to a number of C-level executives a number of months ago, and somebody described, what I would call the poor sucker problem that exists inside of enterprise. And the poor sucker problem is that, there's a board level mandate inside of an organization to innovate with AI. And there's somebody who's like very excited inside of an organization to be able to innovate and start building around agents. And then there's the poor sucker who's both responsible for making sure that the entire threat surface area of the company is resilient and can stand up to all the related threats that people want to be able to do. And so they have like a natural inclination to say, okay, this is massive technology that can read over unstructured text. We should really be able to secure it. But they're also getting a lot of pressure not to block kind of adoption, as fast as possible. And so I think that this type of person who's oftentimes sits in like either AI governance or infosec or within the security organization more generally has a really challenging job. They're being pulled in different directions, pressure to innovate faster, pressure to make sure the innovation doesn't introduce more unintended risk. And I don't think what's ended up happening is like blocking, but I do think we are seeing log jams where things are advancing much more slowly than they should. And this is an area where I think we need to make a lot of progress quickly in order for the enterprise to start to adopt AI as quickly as the technology itself is adopting.
Gotcha. So, have you seen the cases where innovation was blocked by security? Like, what's the worst case of innovation being blocked by security?
I
And
think it's
sorry,
yeah. I think sorry.
yeah,
Go ahead.
sorry. No, you go. You know more.
I think a simple worst case is honestly like when we joined Rubric again, we were working a lot with like cutting edge Silicon Valley tech companies and other like AI forward organizations. We joined Rubric and we talked to a number of organizations that had blocked access towards AI, and so they had blocked models. And there were really legitimate and good reasons for why they blocked it. They were concerned about the fact that organizations might upload documents and others to these models that exist outside of their four walls. But my gosh, like it's such a hindrance, I think, to not be able to access these models in your day to day work. That I really think that that's the worst case of innovation is like if people in your organization just don't have access to this net new technology.
Okay, so then quick question that really comes to mind here. If you were hiring today, would you choose a PhD in AI or a scrappy engineer who can ship agents fast?
Yeah, and of course, it depends a little bit on what you'd be hiring for. So, of course, if I was looking to be able to build, for example, my own net new model for being able to do security and cyber resilience, and I think I'd want to have that PhD in AI ML researcher background. But for 95% of organizations, you're not looking to be able to build your own internal model and train it from scratch. What you need is to be able to take something that works well off the shelf, customize and tailor it to your situation and context, and make sure it's actually doing the job internally. And for that, I don't think there's much that actually beats a scrappy engineer who can move quickly and learn with iteration.
Got it. So, recently I started hearing a lot this term AI governance. What do you think? Who should own AI governance? Is it security, engineering? Is it like an entirely new function that needs to be built within the enterprise orgs?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that we've probably had similar types of questions that have come up in different software cycles overall. Like, if you remember, Natasha, one of the biggest things that had introduced new surface attack areas and security vulnerabilities in the past was cloud. Like, as there was a shift to cloud from traditional on-prem data centers, there's a lot of questions about like how should we think about governance around cloud as like a third party storage where they're hosting my data and my compute workloads. And there have been a few different models that have existed for whether that's owns and sits in security function and engineering function somewhere in the CIO, the own kind of like workflows governance functions. I think today what we see is AI governance, oftentimes in a lot of organizations we talk to, looks like its own function. And AI governance oftentimes pulls like these committees together from a number of different cross-functional stakeholders. So an AI governance committee will have someone from security on it. It'll have like someone from a VP of engineering within it. It'll have somebody from the IT organization within it, and even legal and compliance as well on it. And they're kind of reviewing these projects, determining what kind of guardrails to put in place and what gets a green or red light overall. My point of view is that this is a stopgap solution. That the governance committees we have today make a lot of sense because the technologies move so quickly. We haven't had a time to be able to put like we're basically solving what hopefully will become a platform and products problem with just a bunch of people and process today. And I think where we're going to go is actually have tooling that comes out of the box, either equipped via the hyperscalers or via some of the most innovative companies in the space that really try and solve a lot of the key challenges that we've thrown people and processes at using product and processes and platforms and processes. And so, in my mind, I think, I actually don't think anyone needs to be the singular owner of AI governance. I think it'll be a joint responsibility model, just like modern software and product development works. Security decides a framework of what can work, and then engineering needs to also have the responsibility to be able to follow that. And I really think that, as we go into the future, the same thing is going to happen with AI governance as well.
Interesting. So if we look ahead, maybe 5 years, I don't know, does every enterprise have an AI governance officer sitting next to the CISO? Because like even if the process is owned by a lot of teams, somebody needs to kind of have the full information coming from all of these teams just to to kind of make an umbrella decision.
I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is I think AI is going to permeate every single workflow people do. I don't think AI will sit in one corner of the organization and say, like, look, this is our innovation and AI team. They're working on 3 projects. Rather, what I think is going to happen is like every single team is going to start to use AI embedded in a more heavy way. And so you're going to see the supply chain and logistics team using AI in a heavier way. You're going to see the product development team using AI in a heavier way. Legal is going to be using AI in a heavier way. And I think what's going to happen is you're going to have the rise of like these AI governance categories that help establish frameworks, but eventually these frameworks are just going to be disseminated across the entire organization. And so rather than having kind of one individual stakeholder that has all of the context, you're going to get this, basically discretized into processes, frameworks, and tools that can be used across the organization. And so similar to how I think today, there isn't somebody inside of the organization that thinks about, like, hey, how does cloud work? Because legal uses cloud tools, and supply chain uses cloud tools, and product and engineering obviously use the cloud heavily. Instead, it's kind of like actually embedded as just like a part of everybody's brain who works in that function. That's really kind of the ubiquity that I imagine and see AI working on over the next 3 to 5 years.
Got it. Well, honestly, to me, when I hear you speak about teams and the AI space in general, like whatever you think is going to happen, like I kind of take it as okay, this is going to happen. So I hope we can check back in. Yeah, this is how much I trust you and your judgment. Um, cool. Well, thanks so much, Dev. And I know we made it super fast and super brief, but I hope we can do this again sometime soon with
Yeah,
another exciting topic. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Until next time, keep your agents smart and your data safe.
absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Cheers.